Welcome to Merchant Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, Ben shares a planting progress report both locally and nationally. Check out the fungicide efficacy chart from Crop Protection Network. We talk about the elements in Starting Line Plus seed treatment. And we share some advice from Ken Ferrie.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Merchant Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben, Dylan, and Lynn, and we'll try to keep it short today because we know farmers are really busy right now. So with that, let's just talk about how things are going as far as planting.
I am unbelievably impressed with how fast the crop's going in. So here at Mershman's and at West Point and at Olmsted and at our different facilities, we're able to keep up, but this crop is going in the ground at an extremely fast pace. I have some corn progress planting percentages and soybean progress planting percentages as of Sunday. I'll be really curious to see what these look like next Sunday when they come back out.
We're going to wager a quarter on our guesses for...
we'd probably all be wrong because there's a huge percentage of the crop that went in the ground this week. We were talking with a couple of our sales managers, Brian Regenator, who manages Northeast Iowa. They had guys that were almost completely wrapped up by Tuesday of this week on corn and soybeans, and this is large acre farmers. So the crop's going in the ground fast. It seems like the field conditions are fairly good for being fit, dry enough to get stuff put in the ground. And I think we're going to see crop coming out of the ground in a pretty short manner here. But I wanted to share what the numbers were as of Sunday.
And that was last Sunday.
Yep, this would be as of last Sunday. 2% of Iowa's corn planting went in the ground. Last week was 0. The average for the 2-year average is right at 2%, so we're right on track. And last year was 3%. Illinois, this week's 1%. Last week was 0. Last year was 3%, and the average is 4%. So as of Sunday, things seem to be a little bit further behind. The soybean numbers kind of show that as well, so we're a little bit further behind than where we were, but I think the crop planting progress report is going to be hugely changed by next week. So another look at this is from a nationwide report, and we'll be able to post both of these so you guys can see them. It basically just summarizes what I was just talking about there, but we can take a look at these numbers if you wanted to. One of the things that stood out to me here is winter wheat conditions, and this is kind of more for a timing thing that I wanted to highlight here. This week, the conditions that were good to excellent on the winter wheat was 47%. Last week was 48%, so we're seeing some decline, and I've listened to some podcasts that are emulating that as well. Last year we were at 55% good to excellent. The 5-year average is 45. So we're hanging with the 5-year average of what the winter wheat condition is. The percent headed this week is 8%. Last week was 5%. Last year was 10%, and the 5-year average is 8%. So we're probably not going to be as far ahead as what we were last year. We're probably trending just a little bit further behind. We're not quite as warm as we were last year during the month of it'd be the month of March. That really pushed us really far ahead last year. So I still think we're going to be a little bit further ahead of schedule on our winter wheat harvest times. I think we're going to be a little bit ahead of schedule, but not quite as far ahead of schedule as what we were last year.
And the thing that was very interesting to me is that March was the second windiest month we've ever had on history. So it didn't make well for spraying and doing fertilizer and whatnot. So the question is, how much catching up do we have to do? How many more problems are we going to have because it's been dry and in many areas. So that's where the Power Core option corn, with the multiple post application options with the Liberty Roundup, FOPS, and 2,4-D is going to come in real handy. So we'll have to see, because that's usually when it's dry, we don't have weeds, and as soon as we get wet in the next 7 days, looks like we're going to be a little bit wetter. So the weeds are going to be coming.
I think that's an excellent point. We've had some issues with a very fast planting before from a retail standpoint of just playing catch up, basically, that they're going 120-foot booms, most of them trying to go as fast as they can, but when you've got, now most operators have 2 planters, and then, or if they have one, it's a high-speed planter cranking out 26 on a 40 foot planter, or up to 40 on the 60 footers that retailers just can't keep up, and then you compound the wind on top of it that they're looking to try to do it at night. But shoot, even last night we had 20 to 30 mile an hour wind, so there's just no window. And I think that's important to consider, because especially on the bean side, that we want to make sure that we don't harm our emergence with our pre-emerge. Make sure you're getting out there if you've planted far before the retail is going to be able to come out, to make sure that there's not any issues coming with that. Could be a lot of two pass post applications potentially if we catch that rainy spell, which we've had last year. There were some folks that had to do that. Got along just fine, but it's just got to be cognizant of your planting time and then when that emergence is going to happen. And
always follow what I say. Once you see that weed come out of the ground when it's like this tall, start filling the sprayer up, because by the time you get out there, it's going to be 3 inches, and that's the 3 inches and shorter is actually the size you want to spray weeds if you want to get good control.
You're absolutely correct.
So we tend to think, well, we got to get the big flush and we want to get it all. It's not the right way to do things. You got to be aggressive, be early.
And there's a great cover crop of weeds out there right now, and it's just getting thicker and thicker to the point in some of our viewing area that I don't. Unless you have a disc, going in and trying to pull them out with a field cultivator is just going to end up in a mess. So, unfortunately, in those situations, your options are pretty limited, but there is options. But definitely want to be cognizant as you're going through there that you're not turning one problem into two problems.
Anything else?
Yeah, I guess Iowa State put out a Climate Outlook Friday or Thursday, and they just kind of talk about what the I guess the rest of April kind of looks like. And to Lynn's point and Joe's about the weed, they're predicting April to be warmer than kind of previous years and more moisture. So if we can't get these weeds under control now, they might just keep escalating and turn into a bigger problem later on. Because if we're trying to do tillage or anything to try and get them out, it could just make a mess for things. The wind. It's been windier, and even in the month of April, I'm sure the retailers are just loving the weather that we have. But as we're going through the month of April, GDUs, we are actually ahead of schedule than previous years, so everything is starting to kind of ramp up and really start to move fast. And then we're starting to kind of look wet. We get past maybe this weekend, kind of the weather kind of shifts a little bit. It looks like we're going to start to get quite a bit of moisture kind of spread out the next kind of through April. So we'll see how the rest goes.
What's the old farmer's tale or the wives' tale? Rain on
Easter Sunday, 7 Sundays of rain. And as it warms up, we're going to get more rain. That's just the way it works. It always, and you also get more disease too. So your seed treatments and everything you come into play, very much so. And so.
That's a nice little segue, actually, into what you sent me at the beginning of the week, Joe, on seed treatments.
I just have one comment.
Yep.
I am done making predictions on weather, because I said about the cool down last week and that didn't come to fruition, so I'm done.
Yeah, you're done.
We're not making any more comments about keeping planters in the shed and it being cold, because the next morning I look like a hypocrite.
You're trying to get a competitive advantage against all the farmers out there.
Oh, yeah.
You'd have the only good crop because you planted it.
That's funny. So Lynn is not a weatherman.
Nope.
That's what we're getting at. Perfect. The Crop Protection Network put a little pamphlet out on fungicide efficacy for control of soybean and soybean seedling diseases, and it's got a picture of Rhizoctonia there on the front. But what it talks about is the Crop Protection Network works with multiple land-grant universities in the Midwest, and they evaluate efficacy trials on, in particular one, they're doing active ingredients on seed treatments.
Soybean seed treatments.
Soybean seed treatments on this one. So they do this for fungicide, they do this for herbicides. It's a phenomenal website if you wanted to go look through what they have there. But when it comes to seed treatments, here we have highlighted the active ingredients that are in starting line seed treatment for Mershman's. And what you can tell when you look down through here is that whether it be Pythium, Phytophthora, Fusarium, the different diseases that we're trying to protect against, we have multiple modes of action and excellent control when you compare what we have in the system. So very, very, very few competitive seed treatments can say that they have excellent ratings and multiple effective modes of action, because the two different diseases that are probably the most common, we don't really see rhizoc as much anymore, but the ones that are the most common are Pythium and Phytophthora for dampening off. And with the weather forecast being in the 70s, low 70s, high 60s for highs, I'm going to guess that Phytophthora is going to be something that if you aren't protected with seed treatment, Phytophthora is going to be something that we're going to see quite a bit of this year, because we're wet and it's going to be warmer than average.
Yeah, cold, wet, Pythium, warm, wet, Phytophthora, seedling Phytophthora.
Right.
And the infection occurs at that time, and it can either kill it right then or kill it sometime later on when it gets, pod producing time,
Right.
And keep in mind with Phytophthora, it's a random hit. In other words, you got to have your saturated soil with moisture, because the fungi actually swim to the root to infect it. So you're not going to have Phytophthora unless you have saturated soils, as a general rule, wouldn't you say, Ben?
Yeah, and I've seen Phytophthora follow where the water just runs on top of the ground. So you can have surface water movement, and you'll see Phytophthora basically take that entire area out, and it's perfectly fine a foot away on either side. Yeah. So that's typically late season Phytophthora. Early season Phytophthora can be a little bit more widespread.
Right.
So
anyhow, so feel good. If you're planting early and you're using Mershman starting line base seed treatment, we've got you covered as best that we can do. Now, there's nothing that will protect your seedling when it has no oxygen in the soil. And when you get these heavy rains like some areas have been getting, and you have saturated water standing for more than 24 hours, there's a very low probability that stand's going to be there. It's just because of the fact that you have no oxygen. However, I can tell you, I've seen where somebody planted and 3 foot of water came over a field, and the water dropped off within a relatively fast time, and the soybeans came right up. In fact, and yielded wonderfully. So again, it's just, there's a lot of things we don't understand about how long they can stay underwater, but generally speaking, once that seed is sprouted and goes underwater, it's probably not going to live as long as if it's just planted.
Yep. Some of the things that I've noticed too, when you have water that comes off of a field, there's more oxygen in moving water than there is in stagnant water. So like what you're talking about, if it comes up fast and goes off fast, there's oxygen in there, and it's actually not as depleted as if you have hot conditions and stagnant water that kills soybeans extremely quickly. You mentioned something before we started airing that has to do with flooding and wet conditions.
So before we were talking, we all listen to the Boots in the Field report by Ken Ferrie. He's a wealth of knowledge, a lot of time in the industry, and has really good insights. He was making a suggestion to his growers to get the rotary hoe out and have it ready to go. There's some events that are going to be conducive to some potential crust over, especially in the soils that have the propensity to run back together. Here locally, just notice that that top half inch, we're really dry and really powdery. If we get a big rain and see that get crusted over, we want to be very aggressive in taking care of that, if you know that your soils are going to do that. And the reason his thought process on that is that he'd rather be a day early than a day late, because typically what happens is if you don't get out soon enough and that bean starts to neck out a little bit, the rotary hoe will take the necks off, and then you're back to not really doing anything good. So if you have one, I thought he had a funny comment that a lot of guys that are probably our age, grandpa or dad, had probably chopped it up and sent it on down to the scrap pile. But if you have one and you know that you're in that, have it greased up, ready to go, because that is going to be very important to saving a stand if you're running into some heavy rain conditions that I would say south of I-70, kind of at a line diagonal to St. Louis. Eaton Crow here, we're talking about weather, but looks to be having some very large rain events on some soil that maybe lacks some forgiveness. So just be cognizant of that. If you don't have a rotary hoe, I've heard of guys down there that they'll just take their planter back out with the row cleaners and just try to brush that off a little bit. But it's that time of year where we have to worry about it. Typically to the north, crusting, we tend to have enough push in the beans that they tend to kind of work together to push stuff out. But definitely a great point to look at, to be proactive on that, because it would be very easy to go out with a rotary hoe and save that stand rather than try to go in and try to replant that.
Yeah, ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure, right?
Exactly.
So be early, not late.
I don't know if he said it in the podcast or if it's something that I've heard before, but if you're thinking about rotary hoeing, you should have been out there yesterday or 2 days ago. You know, by the time you're thinking about it, that you're worried about it, it's probably already too late. So you want to be way ahead of it.
Good advice. Well, that brings us to a couple corny jokes, and really what I've got is a couple corny stories, okay? Everybody loves baseball, so these two buddies, big buddies, they love playing baseball. Bob and John, they absolutely love baseball. Bob is the catcher, and John is the pitcher. One day they have the following conversation. Bob says, "I was just wondering if there's baseball in heaven." John replies, "I sure hope so, because it would be hell not being able to play for eternity." "I know that," he said. Tell you what, if one of us dies before the other, then we need to somehow let the other one know if there's baseball in heaven. Sounds like a plan. Well, Bob dies a few years later in a car crash. And a couple of days after, John has a dream where Bob visits him and tells him this: "I have good news and bad news. The good news is that they do play baseball in heaven. And man, they have some of the best games. All the legends play. Ruth, Robinson, Gehrig, everybody in the Hall of Fame plays. But your skill level doesn't matter, because who cares if you win or lose? We're just playing the game that we love." John says, "That sounds awesome, but what's the bad news? You're scheduled to pitch next week." Okay, now this one here, be careful how you use this one, okay? This is to the guys. Be careful, guys, okay? Wife says to the husband, "How would you describe me?" The husband says, "A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K." Wife says, "What does that mean?" Husband says, "Adorable, beautiful, cute, delightful, elegant, fashionable, gorgeous, and hot." Wife says, "Aw, thank you. But what about IJK?" Husband says, "I'm just kidding." That'll get you in trouble. That'll get you in trouble. Anyhow, thank you for watching today or listening by podcast. We sincerely appreciate your business. We hope that you're safe, and we'll see you next week.